Trump has pulled away in every single GOP primary poll, and it's looking very much like we'll see a repeat of the 2020 presidential election. With that in mind, we're going to take a way too early look at a potential Trump versus Biden matchup based on current polling and historical trends. Let's start with the safe states for Joe Biden from east to west. That includes Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, DC, New York, Illinois, New Mexico, California, Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii, bringing Biden to 185 electoral votes. And now the safe states for Donald Trump: West Virginia, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Iowa, both Dakotas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, and Alaska, and Utah, bringing Trump to 127 electoral votes. I also think Texas is pretty safe for Trump. It feels like every year Democrats say this is going to be their year in Texas. I think that year is coming, but not in 2024. And on the flip side, I think Colorado is pretty safe for the Democrats. A recent poll already has Biden up 10, and the state is moving significantly more blue. Next, let's talk quickly about Maine and Nebraska. Both states award 2 electoral votes based on statewide results, with 1 electoral vote for each of their congressional districts. In Maine, I do expect Biden to win statewide and in the 1st congressional district, with Trump winning congressional district 2, just like he did in 2020. And in Nebraska, I expect Trump to win statewide, with Joe Biden picking up the 2nd congressional district, just like he did in 2020. Biden's performance in Congressional District 2 was the best ever by a Democrat in Nebraska since it adopted the district electoral vote allocation. Next, moving on to Minnesota, I view it a bit like Colorado. It's not really purplish anymore. In fact, Democrats have won Minnesota every election since 1976. That's not changing in 2024. And I think much of the same can be said about Ohio. It used to be the bellwether state. Now, it's a very strong state for the GOP. It's been a while since we've had a poll out of Ohio, but they all showed Trump ahead comfortably. And the analysis for Florida isn't much different. I think it'll be competitive, but you have to give the edge to Trump. Recent polling had Trump 10 points ahead of Joe Biden. I don't think the gap will be that wide, but I do expect Trump to win it. Which brings us to the 9 states that will swing this election. Let's start with New Hampshire. Recent polling shows Biden ahead of Trump by 9 points. That would be the widest margin in a presidential election in New Hampshire since 1996. New Hampshire does have a libertarian streak, but I don't see Trump being able to flip it in 2024. The last Republican to win New Hampshire was George W. Bush in 2000. Let's give Joe Biden New Hampshire. Similarly, I expect Joe Biden to win Virginia again. Democrats have won Virginia in 4 straight presidential elections, with Biden's 2020 victory being the biggest margin of those 4 elections. The 2 most recent polls also show Biden ahead, though I think Biden plus 16 in the recent Roanoke College poll is a bit too optimistic. The GOP is in serious trouble if Biden carries a state like Virginia by 16 points on election night. I'm really tempted to make North Carolina the first flip on this map. Biden only lost North Carolina by 1.3% in 2020, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did better now that he's the incumbent president and that Donald Trump has been indicted. However, our 2 most recent polls do have Trump ahead in North Carolina. They're not the most reputable pollsters in the world, but it's what we have for now. North Carolina is definitely one to watch on election night because I think it may be Biden's best chance to flip a state in 2024, but for now, I'm giving it to Trump. On the flip side, Georgia may be Trump's best chance to flip a state he lost in 2020. The most recent poll actually shows Trump ahead of Biden by 4 points, but polls over the past 3 months show this as a true toss-up. There's a big X factor here, and that's Georgia's new election laws, which do things like limit the number of ballot drop boxes, shorten the window for requesting an absentee ballot, and making it a felony for anyone other than a caregiver or a certain family member to help return absentee ballots. Democrats and groups like the ACLU are fighting back, so it's still not totally clear what laws will be in place by the time the 2024 general election rolls around. When the polls are tight and there's uncertainty in the race, I break the tie by giving it to the incumbent. If more polls show Trump ahead in Georgia, I'll flip this state immediately. Let's head west to Nevada, where I think the polls are telling the story. The two most recent polls both showed Joe Biden ahead, and a poll sponsored by a Republican super PAC only showed Trump up by 1%. Nevada will be close, but we've seen Democrats pull out narrow victories in the state repeatedly over the last 8 years. But there's one obvious exception, Joe Lombardo. He was elected governor in 2022, narrowly defeating incumbent Democrat Steve Sisolak. For Trump to flip Nevada, he'll need Lombardo to maintain high approvals and campaign for him across the state. Right now, I'm giving the slight edge to Joe Biden, but don't be surprised if Nevada flips on election night. Arizona is another state with a good chance of flipping. Biden won Arizona by 0.3% in 2020, and the state is trending blue due to its increasingly Hispanic population and influx of young, college-educated voters. Many argued that Trump's repeated attacks against John McCain hurt him in 2020, and when the margin is 0.3%, every little detail counts. But will those attacks still be on voters' minds in 4 years? I'm not so sure. We have two recent polls, one which shows Trump +4 and one which shows Biden +2. And here's another really interesting data point. Biden's approval rating is really bad in Arizona. He's -17 among all voters and -36 among independents. One other thing working against Biden is Kyrsten Sinema, who left the Democratic Party and is running for Senate as an independent. She could weaken Biden's campaign in 2024. So with all this in mind, I'm going to flip Arizona back to the GOP. Let's head north to the Rust Belt, starting with Wisconsin. Biden won Wisconsin by less than 1% in 2020, and we actually have a poll conducted by a great pollster. A recent Marquette poll shows Biden leading Trump by 9%. I think that's quite a bit optimistic, but I do think Biden is the favorite right now. Wisconsin has historically voted for Democratic presidential candidates. In fact, Trump's 2016 victory was the only GOP victory in Wisconsin since Ronald Reagan. Before we head to Michigan, I just want to say that if you're enjoying this video, please hit that subscribe button. YouTube recently lowered its subscriber monetization threshold to 500, and we're so close. Anyway, at this point, Joe Biden just needs either Michigan or Pennsylvania to be re-elected president, but there are some warning signs for Biden, particularly in Michigan. Like in Arizona, Joe Biden's approval among independents is very poor. Recent polling is razor thin, with one poll showing Biden +1 and two others showing a tie. Both parties realize how important Michigan is, which is why they're trying to move the state's primary up into February. In 2020, the polls actually overestimated Biden's chances. An average of the aggregates had Biden at 5.9%, while he only ended up winning the state by less than 3%. And despite all of this, I actually do believe Biden is the narrow favorite right now. Biden's favorability in Michigan is bad, but Trump's is 5% worse. Since 1992, the GOP has only won Michigan once, and that was Trump's narrow victory in 2016. At this point, Biden has crossed the 270 he needs to win, but let's talk about Pennsylvania anyway. Biden won Pennsylvania by less than 2% in 2020, and recent polling suggests another close election. Prime Group shows a tie, Public Opinion Strategies has Biden +3, and Quinnipiac, easily the best pollster of the three, has Trump +1. Like most states, Biden's approval is underwater at -15. However, Democrats have historically done well in Pennsylvania in presidential elections, and Democrats secured two huge victories in 2022 by electing John Fetterman and Josh Shapiro. Shapiro beat Doug Mastriano by 15%. It was a pretty substantial margin. Right now, I think Biden holds Pennsylvania, bringing him to 292 electoral votes, 14 fewer than he received in 2020. And it's actually pretty easy to see Trump's path to victory. He just needs to flip Arizona, Georgia, and any of these Rust Belt states, with Michigan being the most likely in my opinion. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section down below. Then check out this next video where I take an in-depth look at the 2024 Senate race in Arizona.